So everyone that's here, welcome to our session 2 of the Masterclass series, Unleashing the Power of the Guest Portal. Today we'll be covering a high-level session on the RMS Guest Portal and how to get the best out of this feature for you and your guests. As we head into the peak travel season with end-of-year holidays, this will be a powerful feature that will help manage front desk demands by automating check-ins and keeping guests happy, plus heaps more that Dave will dive into. I will leave the details up to Dave, having said that, who is our expert, who will walk you through this session today. Please, everyone meet our product specialist, Dave.
Hello, folks. Welcome. Thanks for coming along. Going to have a great show today, talking about the guest portal. Let's get straight into it. I'll just turn off my camera so you don't have to look at me all day. Okay, today, folks, we're talking about the guest portal. And so what is it? The guest portal is a very simple process. It is just a guest-facing online place where guests can come along and interact with their account. It's not unlike anything that you'd be using in everyday life, not so different to your internet banking. If you've got an app on your phone, chances are there's a place in that app where you can go to your account, where you can check things like account balances, previous transactions, etc., etc. So it is just that, a guest-facing online place. And we're going to talk about all of those things today. We're going to go through some various different aspects of this, what it is, the functionalities, the benefits, etc. We'll go through all of those. We've only got 45 minutes, so I'll, be cherry picking a little bit and talking about sort of the most important things. What does it do? The guest portal can do a lot of things. Fundamentally, it's where a guest manages their own reservations, so they can see reservations coming up, their current reservation, and importantly, past reservations, because there may be details they want from that past reservation. There's the opportunity for a self-check-in or a pre-registration. We'll talk about that in detail. Very important function, which is just saving a lot of time for folks. Document exchange, so you can pass out things like terms and conditions, contracts, all sorts of things. Maybe you need to see something from them. Maybe you want a copy of their passport, licenses. The guest can also download things like statements and invoices. Once again, great time-saving feature. A safe and easy way to process payments. So if people need to pay a deposit or a fee of any sort, then that can be done. That can be processed through the portal. You can also sell stuff, so extra things that you might sell at the property. Also an opportunity to sell gift cards. We'll have a look at that in just a moment. That's up and running and raring to go. And also organising options, various options that you might provide, not necessarily charging for, but, just the different way people might enjoy their holiday. Now, I'm going to talk about, I think I was on the wrong screen, but here we go. I'm just going to talk about the benefits for a moment, and I'm very aware that today I have two distinct groups of people in the audience. I've got a group of people who, understand the benefits, and they're sort of saying, Dave, just get on with it, show us how to set it up, etc. I've got another group of people who are just a little bit cautious. They're just saying, well, hang on, what can people do? A little bit concerned about guests having too much control. But I just want to reassure everyone, I want to bring those two groups together, that at all times you have ultimate control over the operation, what people can see, what they can do, etc. But so I'm not necessarily trying to sell it to you. I'm just sort of trying to explain that it's a safe and wonderful thing. Number one, it does save you a lot of time. So particularly in those pre-check-ins, people are providing all the details for you. You don't have to do all that stuff over the phone, or at reception, endless questions that you need to ask. It is self-service, and self-service is good service. And you might say, well, look, I really like to speak to the people. I like them to come in and interact with my staff. But of course, maybe your reception closes at, say, 8 o'clock at night, and maybe I've got a question at 8:30. So that's not good service if I can't get that response. Same deal if there's 7 people in reception and 6 people on the phone, you can't give me good service because you're too busy. But I can go to the portal and I can get everything I need. There's also what I call the millennial effect, and I'm not talking about the group of people, I'm talking about, the third millennium, where people expect to have these sort of features at their fingertips. They expect that you have something like this. And it also, some of the physical benefits is it speeds up time at check-in, so that when people, if they've done their pre-check-in process online, literally all they have to do, if you want to see them at all at reception, all they have to do is come and pick up a key. You can then interact with them about far more friendlier things than what's your name, what's your address, where's your credit card, blah blah blah. So these are some of the advantages. Let's just go now to what the guest would be looking at. What do they physically see? As you can see, it can be displayed on literally any device, a computer, a tablet, a smartphone. Looks a little bit different on different devices, but fundamentally it works the same. It's a good looking interface, user interface, very logical, very intuitive, and people work it out very, very quickly. We're going to talk now about setting up and customizing it for you. So I'm going to go into the application itself. To get here, I went to the side menu, I went down to setup, and I went down to portals, portal access, and then I clicked on guest portal here. When you come to this section here, so this is where you're going to set it up. This is where you're going to effectively turn it on and customize it to just the way you want to use it. Now, as you can see, lots of tabs, there's lots of things. Let's go through them all. I won't talk about every line because that would take 2 hours, but we will go through it. The tabs are aligned alphabetically, but it will open by default to the general options. And the reason it does that is because the most important option is this one here, enable guest portal. So if you don't want to use the portal at all, take the checkbox, clear that checkbox, and that's it. You can go and have a cup of tea. Your day's done, because it won't show anywhere. People can't see it. But we're all here to see how it works. So that's one. Enable messaging. That's so that guests can send messages from the portal. Allowing contacting the property is sending an email from the portal. A few others. Let's go through the tabs now. We'll go alphabetically, starting at accounting details. This is where you can turn on the ability to use credit card, or payment cards, I should say. Do you want to charge a card transaction fee? You can turn that all on here. It is literally just a case of going through all of these line items. It's all pretty logical. It all makes a lot of sense, and it's either checking the box or turning it off. This is a new one, allow reprinting of invoices. If you have that situation, and many of us do, where guests are calling, oh, I stayed there 3 months ago, can I have a copy of my invoice? They don't have to do that anymore. They can go into the portal and they can reprint their own invoices. The next one, this is probably the biggest tab to go through, so let's just go through this quietly. And this is enabling pre-check-in and check-in. So if we want to enable pre-check-in, we turn on that button there. We say how and what this process is. So and we'll go through how you send this out to customers, etc. But on their phones or their computers, they will see that they've been invited to fill out a pre-check-in, and they'll go through the various processes providing information. You can decide how far into the future before arrival that they can get access to this pre-check-in. I've set mine for 2 days, which sounds like a pretty logical sort of a thing. We then have to pick a letter that will form the basis of the check-in, and really all this needs to be is just a form letter that you've set up. You can see that I've just chosen a standard confirmation letter. Just needs to be whatever blah 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 you say to people. Maybe terms and conditions, maybe just what to expect, etc., etc. So just a bit of a run-in. Also some confirmation text, and we'll see during the process where this all comes up. We need to say what we want to do about payment. And I will say here, having a guest portal without a payment gateway is a bit like having a computer without the internet. It really doesn't do much. So if you don't have a payment gateway at the moment, something you will want to have a pretty good look at. And I can recommend that the RMS payment gateway is probably a way you might want to think about, because it does give you a lot of extra options over and above a standard payment gateway. You can see that the payment conditions on the right, there's quite a few options. Maybe you have a situation where you don't care about creating a payment or a token. Maybe you only want a token, so people will be required to put in their credit card details to complete the pre-registration. Maybe you want the first deposit or the balance, or maybe the total tariff, completely up to you. There is even another option if, let's say, they're paid in full, but you still want to get a credit card token because for whatever reason you want to hold that, then you can turn that on, and through the process they will be asked to enter credit card details. You can also exclude certain travel agents. So for example, if you're dealing with an online travel agent where the travel agent is collecting the payments, then probably you don't want to send this out to them. Let's move on to the declaration. Now, clearly we're on the back end of the pandemic, and this might not seem as important as it was. When we're at the height of the pandemic, and just depending on what jurisdiction around the world you are in, where I was, we were required to ask 7 questions, and we were told which questions to ask. And then there was, even as you can see, 8, 9 and 10, there was an opportunity to put in some bonus questions if you so wanted to do. If you, and we don't need to do that anymore, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. So, they're not going to scrub this thing straight away. If you want to bypass this process altogether, just clear every one of these fields and it'll just jump to the next section. Probably not a bad idea to have a simple question just like this. Maybe you're talking about COVID specifically. Maybe you're saying, is anybody in the family ill at the moment? Not a bad question to ask. And it probably reassures the guest that you care about such things. The enable past locations. Right now, I don't think anyone's being asked to say where they have been over the last 14 days. But if we ever return to those dark days, you'll be able to turn that back on. And we can also choose, so we can allow people to physically check in so that, on the day of arrival or even beforehand, they can physically check themselves in. And maybe you have a situation where they can go and collect keys, or maybe they're using their phone to let themselves in, whatever, and maybe you'll let people do that. Let's keep moving on. We've got our checkout option. So will you allow people to check out or not? I guess if you want to collect the payment, and if you physically want to see them leave, then I guess you don't want them to do this. But by and large, probably not too much damage in allowing them to do this. We can load up some images that get used during the process. External links. So this can be anything at all. It might be things that people can do in your local area. It might be a link to the website of a partner property, for instance, and I'll show you in a moment where that goes. So it's just somewhere that somebody can click on and go to somebody else's website. Back at general options where we were before. This section sets how much you're going to let somebody interact. So can they have a guest profile at all? What sort of information can they do? Can they add extra guests, etc., etc.? Next one is our login image, and I'll show you where we use that in just a moment. Preferences is a slightly interesting one. This was put in the system specifically for a group of properties, but like most things that RMS do, it's done in such a way that it can be modified for fairly general application. And it's just a way of allowing guests to choose certain preferences. And you can see, do you want us to come and pick you up from the airport, for instance? Do you want to tell us about a special occasion? We've got a couple here called interests and hobbies, and one called groceries. Now, these are the standard label fields. And for example, I've got one here called groceries. And I've said, well, would you like us to provide some apples, bananas, and strawberries? Now, I've got to imagine that not many people would want to use that option. So let me just show you. I'm going to go over to setup again. I'm going to go down to property options. And after property options, I'm going to go down to labels. If you can't see a field called labels, it's probably because you're not far enough up the food chain at your particular property. So maybe you need somebody slightly more senior to give you access to that if you want to come in here. You'll see one we've got here called lookup tables, and you'll see here's furniture, groceries, and interests and hobbies. So they're 3 of the sections of preferences that we have. You could change those to be anything you like. For example, you might want to change groceries to something like amenities, and the different things you would have in amenities might be things like robes, slippers, bath bombs, whatever. I'll show you where you would put those things in. So once again, we're back in setup. This time I'm going down to look up tables, and if I keep going down to what is currently called groceries, there it is. I can put in all of the things that I call groceries, but in your case, you might change it to amenities, and you might change these things to robe slippers and bath bombs, for example. So that's just one way you can customize that. So that was preferences. The next one is requirements, and hopefully you're familiar with requirements. These are a way that you can sell things online. You can sell things through the internet booking engine, the RMS Book Now button, or you can do it here in the portal. And these, unlike the preferences, whereas I'm selecting the options that you're providing, with requirements, it's more about selling things. So, for example, I've got a charge for late checkout. I don't have a charge for Porticot, but I could. And you can have as many of those as you like. Reservation settings, all pretty logical. Just work your way through these and select the options you want. The one I might just point out here is over on the right-hand side, allow reservation creation. And I'll show you in a moment where somebody can make a booking from the guest portal. If you are a part of a chain, for instance, and you don't use the internet booking engine supplied by RMS and you have a different one, this is where you can put in an option. So that's probably one to look at. And terms and conditions, and you can go into as much detail with your terms and conditions as you like, and they are viewable from the guest portal. All right, so we've looked at all that. Now, how do people see this? How do people get to the guest portal? You know, how are they going to find it? Well, there's a couple of ways. That's the wrong one. There's a couple of ways. Where do you reckon it is? It's over here. So there's this one, for instance. Now, you'll see that URL at the top, guest portal, blah, 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 RMS Cloud. You could have a button on your website that might be, you know, you might call it My Bookings or My Reservations or My Account, something like that. And people could just click on that button and come to this section here. Now, the only impediment to that is they need to know their reservation number, their last name and their arrival date. Everybody knows that, but, you know, maybe that's just going to slow them down a little bit. So not a bad thing to have, but probably not used as your first way of sharing the guest portal. Let's go back now. So if somebody has made a reservation on the RMS Internet Booking Engine, in their confirmation that they receive automatically, there will be a link, and I think it refers to something like My Bookings or My Reservations, something like that. And the folks can click on that link and they can go straight to the guest portal. And rather than this business here, they are logged straight in. Because we know their reservation number, we know their details, it'll take them straight into the guest portal. Speeds it all up a little bit. Let's go now back to RMS. So the best way, the most direct way that you can share the guest portal is via a text message or via an email that comes from RMS. You would probably want to automate that process by using triggered correspondence. So you'd be sending those out either at the time of reservation, at the time of confirmation, you know, maybe various ones. Let's just go now and have a look at the setup area again. This time I'm going to go into correspondence and I'm going to go first into SMS. And here's one I prepared earlier, which I've called Guest Portal Access. So here's an SMS that I prepared, and I'm going to use this, and this is an automated process. So I've gone into triggered correspondence, and I've said every time somebody makes a reservation, please send them this SMS. In here, because so many SMSs are typically spam these days, people are trying to direct you to naughty places where they want to take all your money and your identity. You need to be, and usually when you get an SMS, you know, you'll see the number it's come from and then maybe the first or even second line of the SMS. What I recommend is that you reassure the guest immediately by perhaps putting their name at the top or maybe the name of the property prominently, and maybe back it up with something like a reservation number so that it just looks a little bit more legitimate. And most importantly here, we need a link to the guest portal. So if you've never done one of these before, it's just a matter of putting in the text you want, and then you need to link a merge field, which is a snippet of information from RMS in regard to the property and or the reservation, which you will include in the message that you're sending to the folks. We have several groups of merge fields. The one we're looking at the moment is in the reservation area. And I'm just going to type in the word portal here because there's about 1,000, and we only want to see these. Three important ones here are this bottom one, which is a short URL for just an individual property. The next one here is if you are a property connected to an enterprise, a group of properties within RMS, or the enterprise itself. So I've used this one here because it's just a single property and it appears just here. If you wanted to use something, you'll see I've got title, given, surname here. If you're wondering how all that happens, if I go to guest, you'll see, I'll just get rid of the word portal there. And right down the bottom, I think it is by memory, is here we are, title, first and last name. So by simply clicking something, I'll just ruin this. By clicking somewhere in here and then clicking on that merge field, in it goes. So when somebody gets this text message, they're going to see their name there. We will get out of there. All right, so that's how people would get direct access to the guest portal. And as I say, you can send that as many times as you like. And any correspondence, prominently put somewhere. By the way, if you want to manage your own reservation, click on this link and go to the guest portal. Let's see what that would look like. And I'm doing the computer version here. It looks a little bit the same on a tablet, slightly different on a smartphone, but all work pretty much the same. You'll see that the first time that I come into the guest portal, it's asking for a password. Now, if you're not particularly fussed, and some people like the security of knowing they're putting in a password, it makes them feel safe that nobody else can get in. What I noticed that a lot of folks do with this particular one, when they're sending out, say, an email, they will put an instruction there saying, hey, look, you'll be asked to put in a password. You don't have to, just hit the skip button. I mean, my eyes directly go to a skip button any chance I get, but that might be something you want to put in if you're not too stressed about getting a password. You'll see now, because this reservation we're talking about is checking in tomorrow, and because I said make pre-check-in available for 2 days prior to arrival, this is what I'm greeted with. Right now, I'm just going to exit out of there, and we'll come back to it because I want to show you some other exciting things as well. Now, I've got just about everything you can turned on for this example of the guest portal. So we'll go through them all. This is our home button here. This is the opportunity to make a reservation. And remember, I didn't put in the RMS IBE. I put in, not that you would do this quietly, but I put in the option to make a booking through booking.com. Invoices, I won't click on that because it's going to, look for all the invoices, but that will give me a list of all the stays I've had and the invoices that I can download and email to myself. I can add to my profile here, so I can edit it, I can change my password. You'll see, and this is just a made up credit card, but you'll see that I've saved a credit card here. If I hadn't, when I went into the guest portal, it would ask me, it would say, look, we don't have a credit card, or a payment card, I should say, for your account. Would you like to put one in there? You don't have to, but you can. And I've got one there, so it's not asking me. All the information, terms and conditions, cancellation policies, features, things to do. And you'll see this extra link. Remember, we talked about that. We added an extra link, and that might be, to the bar down the road. It might be, some other thing, anything at all that you think people might be interested in. We have here the opportunity to purchase a gift card. Now, this is 100% up and running, ready to go. If you want to sell, it's not actually a card, it's a gift certificate. It's a very easy way for folks to buy accommodation for, family, friends, whatever. We're not here to talk about that today, but certainly that's up and running, ready to go. And here's my profile there. I can log out if I want to. You can see I've got my past reservations here, present and future. Let's work our way down. A bit of a summary of the reservation over here. My ETA, the status, it's an unconfirmed reservation at the moment, etc., etc. Let's look at the buttons down the bottom. Now, we've got select charges to pay. This is an option. If you, fairly complicated business, and maybe it's not just the accommodation, but maybe you sell lots of other things as well. Maybe you want to give folks the option to pay different things. Maybe you've got 2 or 3 weeks of payments. Maybe you just pay the first one, etc., etc. I've only got one there, so not worth looking at. This guest list, now this is amazing. When we first, and we put I should explain, apart from being a 5th Dan black belt RMS guru, I've also operated our own accommodation business for the last 30 years. The family and I have been running that. And we started using the guest portal about 3 years ago. And when I saw this, I thought, look, people just won't use this. People won't add guests. Believe me, they do. They put in all of their details, and you have a full list, like all of those things. If you wanted that information, you'd have to type that all, ask the questions, rah, rah, rah. But people provide this information. They just hit the add guests and they put their wives, their families, all of their details in there, and you have it. If they put more guests than you have registered, so if it's 2 adults and 2 kids and they put in 2 adults and 3 kids, it will notify you and say, hey, they've got an extra person coming, so you can address that at arrival or give them a call, whatever. People do use that. Preferences, remember we talked about that before. This is what it'll look like. So this is the opportunity to choose all of those different options. And as I said, you can use as much or as little, or don't use this at all, but you can modify this to be a fairly useful tool. If somebody makes changes here and hits send and save, that will send you a notification. It'll appear in the notification area. It'll also appear on their reservation that they've requested these certain things. Extras, let's say they want to buy something. So in this situation, they could purchase a late checkout or a porta cot. I haven't charged for porta cots, but I do charge for late checkout. They could add that to their reservation. And this doesn't just come as some sort of, line item in correspondence. I mean, if they pick something like a porta cot, that's going to appear on a housekeeper's report. The whole thing becomes a part of the reservation process. I'll jump ahead because I want to come back to pre-check-in. Message property. So let's say you want to just send a message, and we'll just say something like hello, and we can send that. So this is going to now interact, and we may as well do the pre-check-in process now. So this is what would happen if we've asked somebody to do the pre-check-in process. We would click, they would click this button, and they would go through the process. Fairly simple operation. So you can see the first question here, who is this? Is this me or is this somebody else? We're going to say, no, it's me, and it's going to want to know all that information. I could upload an image if I wanted to. I'm going to hit continue. And now it's going to go to terms and conditions. I'm going to say, yes, I acknowledge all that. Happy to go ahead with all of that. And now it's going to ask me, now, if I didn't fill out anything in those questions that we talked about before, it would bypass this entirely, but it is going to ask me that one question. It's going to ask me why we're traveling, and then it's going to ask me to confirm. If you do put in questions here, you want to frame the question so that the correct answer is yes, because if they answer no to this question, it's going to notify you and say, hey, look, take notice, they've said no to this question. Going to go to next. I can put in the details of subsequent guests like this, and I'll just say, wife here, Mrs. Wife. Now it'll let me go through, and now I'm going to say that I agree. I'm going to go next, and it's going to ask for payment. So at this stage, I am going to get out of there because I don't particularly want to make a payment just here at the moment. We can send messages. We've done that, and options are things like, do I want to print or email an invoice? Do I want to print or email a statement, etc., etc. Now, you'll also notice that in this particular case, I've got a document because we can utilize the guest portal to exchange documents. So I've sent these people I want them to accept the terms and conditions. I'll just quickly open that document. And it's a very ugly document. You'll see there's an ugly black line around it. I'm going to show you that in a minute. And I can use these check boxes to, do certain things, accept conditions, blah, blah, blah. And then I can tick that box, and it's going to go ahead. It's going to make me do all the mandatory ones, and then I can put a signature in there, etc. The other thing I can do is upload an item. So if I've said that part of the check-in process is you need to upload something like a passport, a license, a photo, whatever, they would be required to do that here. If they don't, once again, it tells me, notifies me that that hasn't been done. Let's go back into RMS for a moment and see where we would set up one of these documents. So we're going to go now to set up again. We're going to go down to correspondence and into form letters. And I'm going to show you this one here that I've prepared earlier. So a little slightly different in this case where I am not, so this is not something, not a letter that I would send as an email. This is a letter that I would send to the guest portal for somebody to interact with. Pretty hard to interact with an email, but you can interact with a document in the guest portal. One of the things I've done, I've chosen a guest portal action, in this particular case, a file upload. If you don't need them to upload anything, well, then you wouldn't do that. And you'll see I've created this email. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about form letters and emails, but just go over a couple of little things. One of them is I heavily endorse the use of tables when you're putting together an HTML email in RMS. HTML emails are really a pain in the neck to do because it's just a really difficult thing to deal with, because it needs to deal with all the different email clients and different devices that people want to see it on. This makes you do a little bit of work, but it means you can do anything. You can send this looking any way you like. So I like to use tables to constrain everything. So I've put a logo at the top and I've centered all that, etc., etc. And then I've put the bulk of my letter in a table. Now, if I right click here somewhere, you'll see that anywhere at all, anywhere at all. Yep. You'll see that I have one here. So I've right clicked and I've gone down here to table properties. A couple of things I want to show you in here. One is the width. Now I've restricted this to 500 pixels. And what that pretty much ensures is that whatever device somebody opens this up on, whether it's a smartphone, even an older smartphone, they're going to be able to see this exactly the way I intended. It's not going to bounce all over the place. You could probably go to 600, 650 if you wanted to. The other thing you'll see is border size. Now, if I change that to 0, you'll see that that border goes away and all of a sudden it looks a lot better. Let's say I wanted to have some interactive, and you know, it may be that you don't exchange documents and you're sort of saying, you know, why are you putting me through all this data? Well, I was talking, it might be something you might want to use. And I was talking to a gentleman that operated a fairly large tourist resort a couple of years ago, and he was having some issues with his insurance company. And the insurance company was saying, look, we really want to make sure that every single guest acknowledges the fact that you don't have a lifeguard at your pool, at your aquatic centre. And he wasn't sure how to do that. And this resolved this problem, because now everyone who goes to that establishment gets this document sent to them, and they have to tick this box. Not this box, but the appropriate box in his letter. How do we get that box there? I've got an example one here. If I just click anywhere in the document, you'll see that apart from all of these things I have up here, copying and pasting and inserting images and how the text looks, etc., I've got these elements here. The ones you would probably use the most are a checkbox, a radio button, even have a contract tick box here, which comes with a whole lot of acknowledgements, etc. This tick box is probably the one you'd use the most. If I click on there, it will give me a name, and I can just say, consent, whatever, doesn't matter what I call it. I'll make this a required one, so people have to complete it. And there you are. I have my little tick box, so that when somebody gets this document, they've got a tick box to sign off on. More importantly, you'll have evidence that they did this. Now, this is a shocking letter. You'll do a much better job than I have. But that's your 2-second, 5-second rundown on how to do form letters and these documents that you want to share. I just want to have a quick look through here to make sure I've talked about everything. I think I have. So just quickly show you, we were talking about messages before. You'll see if I go into the message section here, I've got one from David Jones, and he said, hello. I can send a message back to him now. Chances are he's not sitting around on the portal waiting for that message, so I can also send it as an SMS. Now, Ash, I think that's about as much as I wanted to say today. I'm hoping that that's got the picture across. Do we have any questions from the folks?
Yeah, great, Dave. That was really informative. Thank you. We did have a couple of questions, and we've had the team in the chat answering a few. Mm-hmm. But I think a good question that we could probably answer was around payment. How do you suggest we manage payment requests for our guests through the guest portal if there was a group booking?
Yeah, so what you would want to do there's a new feature in correspondence where you now have when you're going through the triggered correspondence process, where you can not only send the email to the primary guest, but you can send it to all the what we used to call siblings. I'm not sure what we call them now, so that everyone would get that letter, and you could have merge fields in there that's asking them for payment. You could certainly use, so you can send each individual member of the group, send them all to the guest portal so that they all process their own payment. Probably take a bit too long to talk about it here now, but in groups, you'd need to have it set so that the charges were sent to the individuals, not to the group master. But yeah, there's no reason why every individual member of the group can't have access to the guest portal.
Yeah, great. We've got quite a few questions coming in now. Sorry, one moment.
I think I did see somebody asking there about sending invoices to the guest portal. You sort of don't do that. You'd still send invoices to people in whatever way, either literally hand it to them at the counter or you'd email them. So you're not actually sending the invoice to the portal. You're still sending the invoice the traditional way, but they can view the invoice in the portal, which is probably the key.
Yeah, great. All in one place, right?
Yep.
Yep. Got another question here. How does the look of the enterprise versus single property look and feel for a guest?
So so from the guest's perspective, it's going to look exactly the same. If whether I'm staying at a property that's a single property or whether that property has 10 different, if an enterprise has 10 different properties, from the guest perspective, they're only staying at the one place. That's all they would see. I've never used the URL for the enterprise, but I'm assuming that they would see, for example, the terms and conditions for the enterprise, not the property. I think it would be subtle changes like that.
So we've had a few questions around credit card and payment.
Yep.
And being able to save that in the guest portal as well. So how would that work, Dave, exactly? If they were to save it, can they hide their information? Is there also options for them after they've selected a checkout? Will they be able to charge them after that as well? So just like kind of maybe going over how the payment works within the guest portal.
Yeah, let's talk about a few different things. So the first time somebody goes into the guest portal, if they haven't already entered some payment card details, they'll be prompted to do so. They don't have to, but they can. And those details are then stored in the form of a token, which can be used again to make subsequent payments. Look, I've lost touch with how long tokens last now, and all the rules and regulations around that. But my understanding is that token hangs around until the card has expired, so the guest can use that for subsequent payments. The property, subject to your terms and conditions. You can't just go and buy a Maserati using somebody else's card, but subject to your terms and conditions. If somebody's damaged the property, for example, there's no reason you will have the token because they've provided, whether they knew that or not. So yes, you can use that token again for other charges. Was there another question that I've missed?
Yeah, you're covering the tokens quite well. There's a few coming in about that. But what we could do potentially is provide additional information on tokens and setting them up, an additional resource for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think about it. Yeah.
Another way of getting payments for anyone who's using RMS Pay, and if you're not, I really encourage you to just have a look at it, at least compare payment rates, because there is just all of these extra things you can do now. And one of them is pay by link. So if you need payment from somebody for whatever reason, you can send them a text message or an email that has a link. They click on the link and they can make a payment, very directed. So that's a little bit different to the guest portal, but you could also direct people to the guest portal to make a payment. So, if you said, well, this is overdue, for example, send a text message. with a link to the portal, and bang, there it will be. They'll see the payments required and make the payment, and away we go.
Yeah, nice. So someone's got an enterprise question here that you might be able to help with, Dave, and this is probably the last one that we could probably answer. If setting up an enterprise, do I also need to set up each property within that, or is it all connected?
Well, I'll make a few assumptions about that question. So you've got an enterprise, you've got, your half a dozen properties, 100 properties, whatever it is. You're setting that all up within RMS, and you've got your properties all nicely done. So when you go into the portal section, you're going to have the opportunity to have different options per property, because, maybe within an enterprise, they're completely different. One's a motel, one's a resort, whatever. Maybe you've got different conditions. So that can be properties specific, if that's the question. And yeah, you can have different terms and conditions, different everything. Yep. If I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was pretty straightforward. Given the time, we're slowly running out of time, and I can see lots of questions in the chat, which is amazing. We'll do our best to answer those in another resource, and also reach out to anyone that needs help with anything particular with our customer service team. But having said that, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. We really appreciate everyone jumping on board. We will be taking a short break over the holidays, and we'll be continuing the series in the new year. So look out for some emails around that. Should be launching in Feb. We will also send a live recording of this live session for you to watch on demand whenever you like. If you have a few spare minutes, if you could please answer our survey so we can get your feedback and improve. But outside of that, Dave, thank you so much. You're awesome. And we hope that, yeah.
Thanks, Ash. And if I could just say to the folks, anyone who's still hanging around, we'd love your engagement and feedback on these webinars and the videos and things. There's quite a few new videos being released in the last week, and lots more to come. We'd love to see, and if you get this recording in the form of a YouTube video, we'd love to see some comments on the videos, just so that it helps us sculpture these presentations to see what you want to see and the way you want them to be. So just the more interaction, the better, would be fantastic.
Great. And again, I'll keep an eye out for all your questions and make sure we get to as many of them as we can. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Amazing. Thanks, Ash. Thanks, folks. See you soon.